Boy, you're selling drugs in my neighborhood. Officer Derek Sullivan slams the car door and marches toward the well-dressed black man. Without warning, he shoves the man against the silver sedan, pressing his face into the cold metal. I don't have any drugs, officer. Sure you don't. Sullivan's hands move with practiced efficiency, patting down the expensive suit. Turn around. Hands behind your back. The metallic click of handcuffs echoes through the empty parking lot. Sullivan opens the car door and reaches into the glove compartment. His hand emerges holding a small plastic baggie filled with white powder. Well, well. Look what we have here. The man's briefcase sits forgotten on the hood, city seal catching the streetlight. Inside are transition documents marked Office of the Mayor. 3 floors above, an inauguration photo sits on a mahogany desk. Sullivan grins as he waves the planted evidence. Have you ever watched someone's assumptions completely blind them to who they were really dealing with? 48 hours earlier, Doctor. Jonathan Hayes raised his right hand in the City Hall rotunda, surrounded by cheering supporters. The oath of office echoed through marble corridors that had seen decades of political promises. At 52, Hayes represented something new. A civil rights attorney who'd spent 15 years defending victims of police misconduct, now sworn in as the city's first black mayor in over 30 years. I solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution and serve all citizens of this great city. The applause was thunderous, but Hayes knew the real work started now. His campaign had centered on one controversial promise: comprehensive police reform. Body cameras for every officer. Independent oversight of misconduct complaints, an end to the thin blue line that protected bad cops at the expense of good ones. Not everyone was celebrating. 3 miles across town, Officer Derek Sullivan sat in the precinct break room, watching the inauguration coverage with growing disgust. 15 years on the force had taught him how the world really worked. Politicians came and went, but the streets remained the same. Someone had to keep order, even if bleeding hearts didn't understand the methods required. The new mayor thinks he's going to change everything, Sullivan muttered to his partner, Officer Mike Torres. We'll see about that. Sullivan's personnel file told a different story than his swagger suggested. 14 formal complaints in 5 years, excessive force allegations, suspicious evidence discoveries. Each time, the police union had closed ranks, filing paperwork and applying pressure until complaints disappeared into bureaucratic limbo. The complaints shared disturbing patterns: young black men, late-night encounters. Drugs mysteriously appear during searches. Sullivan had mastered the art of manufacturing probable cause, turning routine traffic stops into felony arrests with surgical precision. Captain Maria Rodriguez had tried warning him twice. Derek, you're walking a thin line. These complaints keep coming. Street criminals file complaints when they get caught. That's what they do. Sullivan's response never varied. I'm just doing my job. But Rodriguez wasn't buying it anymore. Hayes' election had sent shockwaves through the department's old guard. Change was coming whether they liked it or not, and officers like Sullivan would be first in line for scrutiny. Hayes had chosen to keep his inauguration low-key, declining the traditional mayor's mansion until renovations were complete. He maintained his law practice downtown, the same office where he'd built his reputation defending the defenseless. The decision was practical and symbolic: stay connected to the community that elected him. On this particular evening, Hayes was leaving his first official city council meeting as mayor. The session had run late, filled with budget discussions and the delicate politics of implementing his reform agenda. Opposition council members had made their displeasure clear, questioning every proposal with thinly veiled hostility. Mr. Mayor, Council President Angela Washington had said during a break, "You're moving too fast on these police reforms. Some people aren't ready for such dramatic changes." Hayes had smiled politely. "Justice delayed is justice denied, Angela. We can't afford to move slowly when people's lives are at stake." Now, walking through the financial district's empty streets toward his car, Hayes carried a briefcase full of transition documents. personnel files on problematic officers, budget allocations for new oversight mechanisms, policy drafts that would fundamentally reshape how the city's police department operated. The neighborhood was Sullivan's regular patrol area, a territory he'd claimed through years of aggressive enforcement. Local business owners knew his reputation. Keep your head down, don't ask questions, and Officer Sullivan would keep the undesirables away from your establishments. Tonight's patrol had been quiet until Sullivan spotted the black man in the expensive suit. Something about the scene bothered him. Wrong person, wrong neighborhood, wrong time of night. In Sullivan's experience, well-dressed didn't mean legitimate. It often meant successful criminals with good lawyers and dangerous connections. The silver sedan had temporary plates, recently purchased from a high-end dealership. Sullivan couldn't see inside the briefcase, couldn't know about the city documents or the mayoral transition materials. All he saw was opportunity, another chance to remind someone that despite changing politics, the streets still belonged to him. Hayes' phone buzzed with messages from his chief of staff about tomorrow's schedule. 3 morning meetings, including a breakfast with the police chief to discuss implementation timelines for the new accountability measures. Sullivan would be high on their list of officers requiring immediate attention. Neither man knew they were about to collide in a confrontation that would define Hayes' entire mayoral tenure and destroy Sullivan's carefully constructed career in a matter of hours. The security cameras positioned throughout the financial district hummed quietly, recording everything with digital precision that would soon matter more than either man could imagine. Sullivan's patrol car rolls to a stop 30 feet from the silver sedan. The headlights cast harsh shadows as he steps out, boots hitting pavement with deliberate force. His hand instinctively moves to his service weapon, a gesture designed to establish dominance from the first moment of contact. Turn around slowly. Keep your hands visible. Hayes complies without argument, briefcase still in his left hand. His movements are calm, measured, the behavior of someone who understands that cooperation might be the difference between life and death in situations like this. I'm just heading to my car, officer. Is there a problem? Sullivan circles him like a predator, eyes scanning for any excuse to escalate. The problem is, you are in this neighborhood at this time of night. We've had reports of drug activity around here. I work in that building. Hayes nods toward the office tower behind them. I'm an attorney. Sure you are. Sullivan's voice drips with disbelief. Attorneys don't usually conduct business at midnight in parking lots. Put the briefcase down and place your hands on the vehicle. Hayes sets the briefcase on the sedan's hood. The city seal faces downward, invisible in the dim lighting. Inside the case, transition documents marked Confidential Office of the Mayor sit inches away from Sullivan's reaching hands, but might as well be on another planet. Officer, I'm happy to show you my identification. My driver's license will confirm. I'll decide what I need to see. Sullivan's hands begin patting down Hayes' expensive suit, searching for weapons or contraband that doesn't exist. Are you carrying anything illegal? Drugs? Weapons? Anything that's going to stick me? No, sir. Nothing like that. The search produces only a wallet, keys, and a cell phone. Sullivan examines the driver's license with exaggerated scrutiny, noting the government building address but dismissing it as irrelevant. In his experience, criminals often used fake addresses to throw off investigations. This address is current? Yes, it is. Sullivan tosses the license back carelessly. Funny thing about drug dealers, they always have explanations, always claim they're somebody important. From his patrol car, Sullivan retrieves a small plastic baggie filled with white powder. It's the same type he's planted dozens of times before, purchased from evidence lockers of closed cases and recycled into new arrests. The technique has never failed him yet. I'm going to search your vehicle now. Do you have any objections? Hayes straightens slightly. Officer, you don't have probable cause to search my car. I haven't committed any crime, and you have no reasonable suspicion. Sounds like you know a lot about police procedure for an innocent man. Sullivan's grin is predatory. That makes me even more suspicious. Without waiting for consent, Sullivan opens the sedan's passenger door. His movements are quick, practiced. The baggie slides smoothly into the glove compartment, nestled behind the owner's manual where it will be discovered moments later. Well, well, well. What do we have here? Sullivan's hand emerges holding the planted evidence, white powder clearly visible through the clear plastic. He holds it up like a trophy, making sure any security cameras capture the moment of discovery. That's not mine. I've never seen that before in my life. They all say that. Sullivan signals to his backup unit, which has been circling the block. Every single one of them claims innocence right up until they're sitting in a cell. Officer Torres arrives within minutes, his squad car's blue lights painting the parking lot in alternating shadows. Sullivan waves him over with obvious satisfaction. Mike, look what our well-dressed friend was carrying around. Looks like about 2 grams of cocaine to me. Torres examines the baggie with practiced eyes. Nice catch, Derek. How'd you know what to look at? Experience. 15 years on these streets teaches you to spot the signs. Sullivan turns back to Hayes, handcuffs already in hand. You're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance. The Miranda rights emerge in a rushed monotone. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Hayes listens with the careful attention of someone who's heard these words hundreds of times from the other side of the courtroom. He notices the abbreviated delivery, the casual dismissal of constitutional protections that should be sacred. I understand my rights, officer. I'd like to call my attorney immediately. You'll get your phone call when we get to the station. Sullivan snaps the cuffs into place, tighter than necessary. Right now, you're my problem. The backup officer helps load Hayes into the patrol car's back seat. The cage separating front from back is scratched and dented from years of angry prisoners. The smell of disinfectant mixed with human desperation permeates the vinyl seats. As they drive toward the county jail, Sullivan feels the familiar satisfaction of another successful arrest. The paperwork will be straightforward: suspicious behavior, consensual search, discovery of contraband. The prosecutor will file standard charges, and another criminal will be off the streets. You picked the wrong neighborhood tonight, friend, Sullivan says over his shoulder. This is my territory, and I don't tolerate drug dealers operating on my watch. Hayes remains silent, mentally cataloging every procedural violation, every constitutional right ignored or trampled. His legal mind is already constructing the defense that will be unnecessary once his identity becomes known. But for now, he's just another black man in handcuffs, riding through the city he was elected to lead just 48 hours ago. The booking process at county begins like any other. Hayes is photographed, fingerprinted, and processed through the same system he's navigated on behalf of countless clients. The irony isn't lost on him. The reformer becomes the reformed. The advocate becomes the accused. Desk Sergeant Williams glances at the booking sheet with tired eyes. Jonathan Hayes, possession of a controlled substance, age 52, address. He pauses, squinting at the paperwork. This address is the government building downtown. Probably fake, Sullivan interjects quickly. These guys use official addresses to try to confuse things. I've seen it before. The sergeant shrugs and continues processing. In his 20-year career, he's learned not to question arresting officers too closely. Sullivan has a reputation for solid arrests and airtight paperwork. If he says someone's a drug dealer, that's usually good enough. Hayes is assigned to holding cell number 3, a concrete box shared with 2 other men awaiting arraignment. One appears to be sleeping off a drunk and disorderly charge. The other, a young man barely out of his teens, stares at Hayes with obvious curiosity. You don't look like the usual type they bring in here, the young man whispers. What's the usual type? People like me. Poor people. Desperate people. He studies Hayes' expensive suit, now wrinkled from the arrest process. You look like somebody important. Hayes sits on the narrow bench, back straight despite the circumstances. We're all important. We all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect under the law. The young man laughs bitterly. Tell that to the cops who brought us here. Outside the holding area, Sullivan completes his paperwork with practiced efficiency. The incident report paints a clear picture. Suspicious individual, cooperative search, contraband discovered. Every box checked, every procedure documented according to department guidelines. What the report doesn't mention are the planted drugs, the illegal search, or the racial profiling that initiated the contact. Those details live only in Sullivan's memory and the security footage he doesn't know exists. The clock above the booking desk reads 1:47 a.m. In 6 hours, Hayes is supposed to chair his first cabinet meeting as mayor. His chief of staff will begin making calls when he doesn't show up, setting in motion a chain of events that will unravel Sullivan's carefully constructed lie faster than either man can imagine. But for now, the system grinds forward with mechanical precision, processing another black man through the machinery of American justice, unaware that this particular arrest will soon make headlines across the nation. The holding cell's fluorescent lights never turn off, casting everything in harsh, institutional white. Hayes sits between the sleeping drunk and the young man who introduced himself as Marcus Williams, arrested for loitering while waiting for a bus after his night shift at a warehouse. First time? Marcus asks quietly. Yes. Shows. You still got that look like you expect this to make sense. Marcus shifts on the uncomfortable bench. Been through this dance 4 times. Always the same officers, always the same charges that somehow stick just long enough to cost me jobs. Hayes absorbs this information with growing unease. The casual acceptance of systemic abuse, the resigned way Marcus describes repeated harassment, it paints a picture of institutional failure that goes far beyond one bad officer. What officers? Sullivan, mostly. Sometimes his partner, Torres. They got their territory mapped out real clear, know exactly who belongs where and when. Marcus glances toward the booking area. Sullivan's got a reputation. Nobody talks about it officially, but word gets around. At 2:30 a.m., 3 hours after Hayes should have been home preparing for morning meetings, his chief of staff, Sarah Carter, begins her first worried phone call. It goes straight to voicemail. Jonathan, it's Sarah. Just checking that you're prepared for the 8 a.m. cabinet meeting. Call me back when you get this. She tries again at 3:15, then 4:45. By 5:30, genuine concern has replaced professional worry. Meanwhile, Captain Rodriguez arrives for her early shift and notices irregularities in Sullivan's overnight report. The timeline seems rushed. The description of probable cause feels formulaic, almost copy-pasted from previous incidents. Most troubling, the suspect's address matches the government building downtown. Williams, she calls to the desk sergeant. This booking from last night, Jonathan Hayes. Can you verify this address? Sullivan said it was probably fake. Guys use official addresses sometimes to confuse things. Rodriguez pulls up Hayes' driver's license information on her computer. Valid license, clean record, legitimate address. Something doesn't add up. At the Paramount office building, security supervisor Janet Morrison arrives for her morning shift and notices the previous night's unusual activity. Multiple police cars, an arrest in the parking lot, all captured in crystal-clear detail by the building's newly upgraded surveillance system. Tom, did you file an incident report about that arrest last night? Her overnight guard, Tom Bradley, nods grimly. I tried to tell the officers I witnessed the whole thing, but they weren't interested in statements. Told me to mind my own business. What did you see? Officer planted something in that man's car, clear as day on camera, pulled a baggie from his own pocket, slipped it into the glove compartment, then found it 2 minutes later. Morrison pulls up the footage immediately. The timestamp shows 11:43 p.m. Officer Sullivan removing an object from his duty belt and placing it in the sedan's glove compartment. At 11:45 p.m., the same officer opens the compartment and emerges holding what appears to be a small plastic bag. Jesus Christ. Tom, make copies of this footage immediately. Multiple copies. By 6 a.m., Hayes had been in custody for over 6 hours without his legally guaranteed phone call. The public defender's office won't open for another 2 hours. His arraignment is scheduled for 10 a.m., a rushed timeline that will prevent adequate preparation of his defense. Sarah Carter's concern has escalated to alarm. She contacts Mayor Hayes' deputy chief of staff, his personal assistant, and finally calls the police non-emergency line. "I'm trying to locate Mayor Jonathan Hayes. He missed several scheduled appointments and isn't responding to calls." The dispatcher checks overnight incident reports, but finds no record of anyone by that name. Sullivan's booking used only Jonathan Hayes without the title, buried among dozens of other arrests. "No record of that name in our system, ma'am." "Have you tried calling hospitals?" At City Hall, the 8 a.m. cabinet meeting proceeds without its leader. Department heads exchange worried glances as Sarah Carter makes excuses about emergency matters requiring the mayor's immediate attention. The truth is, nobody knows where he is. Detective Lisa Carter, no relation to the chief of staff, arrives at headquarters and notices Captain Rodriguez reviewing arrest reports with unusual intensity. "Something wrong, Captain?" "This arrest from last night. Officer Sullivan claims he discovered drugs during a consensual search, but the suspect's address is bothering me." Rodriguez shows her the paperwork. "Government building downtown. Clean record. And look at this. He listed his occupation as attorney." Detective Carter examines the file more carefully. Jonathan Hayes. Why does that name sound familiar? Run a full background check. Something about this doesn't feel right. The database search takes less than 2 minutes to return results that make both women's blood run cold. Jonathan Hayes, age 52, occupation listed as Mayor, City of Derrière, with an inauguration date of 2 days prior. "Holy shit," Detective Carter whispers. "Rodriguez, we've got a massive problem." "How massive?" "We arrested the mayor." Sullivan arrested the sitting mayor of our city on drug charges, and he's been in jail for 6 hours. The institutional machinery that had been grinding forward with bureaucratic efficiency suddenly lurches to a complete stop. In law enforcement, there are mistakes. And then there are career-ending catastrophes that trigger federal investigations and congressional hearings. This falls squarely into the second category. Rodriguez grabs her phone to call the chief, but Detective Carter stops her. "Captain, before we make any calls, we need to see that arrest footage. If this is what I think it is, we're about to be in the middle of the biggest police misconduct case this city has ever seen." Detective Carter's hands shake slightly as she dials the Paramount Office Building's security office. The implications of what they've discovered are staggering, not just for Sullivan, but for the entire department, the city, and potentially their own careers. "This is Detective Carter, Metro Police. I need to speak with your security supervisor about an incident in your parking lot last night." "That would be Janet Morrison. Hold on." Morrison's voice is crisp and professional when she comes on the line. "Detective, I was actually planning to call you this morning. We have security footage of what appears to be evidence tampering during an arrest last night. We need to see that footage immediately." "I'll be here." "And Detective, you're going to want to bring your supervisors. This is bigger than a simple misconduct case." Captain Rodriguez and Detective Carter arrive at the Paramount Building within 20 minutes, accompanied by Internal Affairs Lieutenant David Park. Morrison leads them to the security office where multiple monitors display different camera angles of the previous night's incident. "I've queued it up to the relevant timestamps," Morrison says, her finger hovering over the play button. "Fair warning, this is going to be difficult to watch." The footage begins at 11:41 p.m. Hayes approaches his sedan while Sullivan's patrol car is still 50 yards away. He moves with the unhurried pace of someone ending a long workday, briefcase in hand, checking his phone for messages. Normal behavior, Lieutenant Park notes. No indication of criminal activity or suspicious conduct. At 11:42, Sullivan's car accelerates toward Hayes's position. The audio picks up Sullivan's voice clearly. "Hey boy, drop that briefcase and get on the ground." Captain Rodriguez winces at the language. In modern policing, such terminology is not just unprofessional. It's evidence of bias that can destroy cases in court. The camera captures Hayes's compliance in perfect detail. His movements are careful, controlled, designed to avoid any action that might be interpreted as threatening. Morrison fast-forwards through the pat-down and identification check. "Here's where it gets interesting," she says, slowing the playback to normal speed. At 11:43:17, Sullivan approaches the sedan's passenger side. His body partially blocks the camera's view, but his movements are clearly visible. He reaches to his duty belt, removes a small object, and opens the car door. "Jesus," Detective Carter breathes. He's planting it. The footage shows Sullivan's hand inside the glove compartment for exactly 14 seconds. When he withdraws, his hands are empty. He closes the door, walks around the vehicle once, then returns to the passenger side at 11:45:03. Sullivan opens the glove compartment again. This time, his hand emerges holding a clear plastic baggie. "Well, well, well. What do we have here?" Sullivan's voice carries clearly on the audio. Lieutenant Park pauses the video. "That's evidence tampering, false arrest, civil rights violation, and about 6 other felonies. This officer's career is over." "It gets worse," Morrison says quietly. "Watch Hayes's reaction." She resumes playback. Hayes doesn't protest or argue when the drugs are discovered. Instead, he responds with the measured calm of someone who understands exactly what's happening and knows that resistance will only escalate the situation. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before in my life." His voice is steady, professional. Not the panicked denial of a caught criminal, but the controlled response of someone managing a dangerous situation with patience and intelligence. "They all say that," Sullivan responds on the recording, clearly enjoying the moment. Detective Carter studies Hayes' posture throughout the arrest process. "Captain, look at how he's handling this. This isn't someone afraid of being caught. This is someone calculating legal strategy." The realization hits Rodriguez like a physical blow. He's a lawyer. He's been through this process hundreds of times from the other side. He knows exactly what Sullivan is doing wrong. Morrison switches to a different camera angle showing Hayes being loaded into the patrol car. The footage captures Sullivan's smug satisfaction, his casual conversation with Officer Torres, and his obvious belief that he's just scored another easy arrest. "There's more," Morrison says. Audio from when Sullivan was filling out his paperwork. She plays a recording from Sullivan's body camera, which had been activated during the transport to jail. "You picked the wrong neighborhood tonight, friend. This is my territory, and I don't tolerate drug dealers operating on my watch." The contempt in Sullivan's voice is unmistakable. He's not just arresting someone he believes to be a criminal. He's asserting dominance, establishing territory, sending a message about who controls these streets. Lieutenant Park reviews his notes grimly. Racial profiling, illegal search, evidence tampering, false imprisonment, civil rights violations under federal law. This is a federal case now. We need to notify the FBI immediately. "Wait," Detective Carter says, studying the timestamp again. "What time did this happen?" 11:43 p.m., Morrison confirms. "The mayor was sworn in 48 hours ago. He would have been in office when this arrest occurred." The full magnitude of the situation becomes clear. Sullivan didn't just frame an innocent man. He framed the sitting mayor of our city. Captain Rodriguez reaches for her phone to call Chief Williams but hesitates. "Before we make this call, we need to understand the scope. Park, how many similar arrests has Sullivan made in the past year?" Lieutenant Park pulls up Sullivan's arrest record on his tablet. The numbers are staggering. 47 drug possession arrests in the past 12 months, primarily young black males in upscale neighborhoods. 47 cases that might be compromised, he says slowly. If this is a pattern, we're looking at dozens of wrongful convictions. Detective Carter examines the arrest locations on a map. Look at this clustering. Same neighborhoods, same demographics, same charges. This isn't random patrol work. This is systematic targeting. The security footage continues running in the background, showing Sullivan's confident swagger as he completes his paperwork. His body language radiates satisfaction, the expression of someone who believes he's untouchable. Morrison switches to the final camera angle, showing Hayes sitting in the patrol car's back seat. Even in custody, his posture remains dignified. He's not slumped in defeat or struggling against restraints. He sits upright, observing, processing, and preparing. "Gentlemen," Morrison says quietly, "I've been in security for 15 years. I've seen a lot of arrests, a lot of police interactions. That man in the back seat? He's not afraid. He's angry, but he's not afraid. He knows something that the officer doesn't." Captain Rodriguez finally makes the call to Chief Williams. "Chief, we have a code red situation. We need you in the building immediately, and you need to contact the mayor's office." "What kind of code red?" "The kind that makes national news and triggers federal investigations. Sir, we arrested Mayor Hayes last night on planted drug charges. It's all on video." The silence on the other end of the line stretches for nearly 10 seconds. Jesus Christ, how long has he been in custody? 7 hours, sir. And Chief? This appears to be part of a larger pattern. We might be looking at dozens of compromised cases. Within minutes, the machinery of damage control begins turning. But it's already too late. The footage is saved, the evidence is documented, and the truth is about to explode across every news outlet in the country. Officer Sullivan's confident swagger is about to meet the immovable force of accountability he never saw coming. Chief Williams arrives at headquarters within 30 minutes, his usual calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. The conference room fills quickly. Captain Rodriguez, Detective Carter, Lieutenant Park, the city attorney, and Deputy Chief Harrison, all summoned for emergency damage control. "Show me the footage," Williams says without preamble. They watch in silence as Sullivan plants the evidence, arrests the mayor, and transports him to jail with obvious satisfaction. When the video ends, Williams removes his glasses and rubs his temples. "How many people know about this?" "Security supervisor at Paramount Building, her overnight guard, the 4 of us, and now you," Rodriguez reports. Mayor Hayes is still in custody. His staff has been calling, but the booking logged him as Jonathan Hayes without the title. Jesus Christ. Williams reaches for his phone. "I'm calling the jail immediately. Get him released right now, before this becomes public." But Detective Carter's tablet is already buzzing with news alerts. "Chief, we might be too late." She shows him the screen. Local news reporter Amanda Martinez has posted on social media. "Breaking. Sources confirm prominent city official arrested overnight on drug charges." Developing story. How the hell did she find out? "The mayor's chief of staff called multiple news outlets when he didn't show up for morning meetings," Lieutenant Park explains. "They've been making calls, trying to track him down." Williams dials the county jail directly. "This is Chief Williams. I need Jonathan Hayes released immediately. Yes, the booking from last night. This is a code red emergency." "What do you mean he's already been transferred to the courthouse holding for arraignment?" "The arraignment is scheduled to begin in 90 minutes. In the courthouse basement, Hayes sits in a holding cell with 6 other defendants awaiting their turn before Judge Patricia Morrison. The public defender assigned to his case, overwhelmed attorney Rachel Green, has spent exactly 4 minutes reviewing his file. "Mr. Hayes, you're charged with possession of a controlled substance. The evidence seems straightforward. Officer Sullivan discovered cocaine in your vehicle during a consensual search." Green barely looks up from her paperwork. "I can negotiate a plea deal for probation if you have no prior record. I want to go to trial. Hayes says firmly. Mr. Hayes, with respect, fighting these charges is expensive and rarely successful. The officer has 15 years of experience and a solid reputation. Hayes studies the young attorney with growing dismay. This is the representation available to defendants who can't afford private counsel, overworked, underfunded, and trained to process cases rather than fight them. I'm not taking a plea deal for a crime I didn't commit. Back at headquarters, the investigation expands with terrifying speed. Lieutenant Park has pulled Sullivan's arrest records for the past 3 years, revealing a pattern that makes seasoned investigators physically sick. 137 drug arrests in 36 months, Park reports. 93% involve black males between ages 18 and 45. 87% occurred in upscale neighborhoods where the defendants had no obvious reason to be. Detective Carter maps the arrests geographically. Look at this clustering. Same 4-block radius, always late night, always the same charge, simple possession with intent to distribute. What's the conviction rate? Williams asks. 91%. Most took plea deals to avoid trial. The numbers tell a story of systematic abuse that goes far beyond a single corrupt officer. They represent destroyed lives, broken families, and careers ended by fabricated evidence. Captain Rodriguez's phone buzzes with an urgent text from the Paramount Building's security office. More footage has been reviewed. Sullivan has been planting evidence in that parking lot for over 2 years. Multiple incidents documented. The FBI field office receives Chief Williams' call at 9:47 a.m. Special Agent Sarah Kim listens to the preliminary report with growing amazement. Chief, you're describing a federal civil rights conspiracy. This goes beyond local misconduct. We're talking about systematic deprivation of rights under color of law. How quickly can you mobilize an investigation team? We're already mobilizing. But Chief, once federal involvement begins, your department loses control of this investigation. Everything becomes evidence. Every case Sullivan touched gets reviewed. At the courthouse, Hayes' arraignment approaches. Judge Morrison reviews the standard drug possession case with routine efficiency until she notices something unusual about the defendant's address. Mr. Hayes, your listed address is the government building downtown. Are you a city employee? Before the overwhelmed public defender can respond, Hayes stands. Your Honor, I'm the mayor of this city. I was sworn into office 48 hours ago. The courtroom falls completely silent. Judge Morrison's gavel hovers in midair. Court reporters stop typing. Even the bailiffs turn to stare. I'm sorry, did you say you're the mayor? Yes, Your Honor. Mayor Jonathan Hayes. I was arrested last night by Officer Derek Sullivan on fabricated drug charges. The evidence against me was planted, and I have reason to believe this is part of a systematic pattern of misconduct. Judge Morrison calls an immediate recess. Within minutes, her chambers fill with prosecutors, defense attorneys, and court administrators trying to process the implications. The district attorney himself arrives within 20 minutes, his face pale with understanding of the political earthquake they're sitting on. Meanwhile, Sullivan arrives for his regular day shift, completely unaware that his world is collapsing. He clocks in at 10 a.m., exchanges casual greetings with fellow officers, and begins preparing for another patrol in his claimed territory. Hey, Derek, Officer Torres calls out. Did you hear anything about that arrest last night? The one in the financial district? What about it? Captain Rodriguez was asking questions this morning. Seemed pretty interested in your paperwork. Sullivan shrugs confidently. Standard drug arrest. Everything by the book. These lawyers downtown think they can buy their way out of trouble, but evidence is evidence. His confidence evaporates when Lieutenant Park approaches his desk with a formal expression. Officer Sullivan, I need you to report to Internal Affairs immediately. What for? Just report to IA now. The Internal Affairs interview room is small, windowless, and designed to create psychological pressure. Sullivan enters expecting routine questions about a minor procedural issue. Instead, he finds Lieutenant Park, Detective Carter, and FBI Special Agent Kim waiting with boxes of evidence. Officer Sullivan, you're being questioned regarding the arrest of Jonathan Hayes on September 7th at approximately 11:45 p.m. Standard drug arrest. Guy was dealing in my patrol area. Agent Kim slides a photograph across the table. It's a still frame from the security footage, showing Sullivan placing the baggie in Hayes' glove compartment. Officer Sullivan, this photograph shows you planting evidence in Mr. Hayes' vehicle. We have video documentation of the entire incident. Sullivan's confident expression crumbles like a house of cards. His face goes pale, then flushed, as the reality of his situation becomes undeniable. That's not... The camera angle is misleading. We have 4 different camera angles, Officer Sullivan, plus audio recording from your body camera and witness testimony from building security. Detective Carter opens a second file. We've also reviewed your arrest pattern for the past 3 years. 137 cases with remarkably similar circumstances. Would you like to explain that pattern? Sullivan's hands begin trembling slightly. 15 years of aggressive policing, protected by union lawyers and institutional indifference, have suddenly become federal evidence of systematic civil rights violations. I want my union representative. That's your right, Agent Kim confirms. But Officer Sullivan, I should inform you that we're investigating this as a federal conspiracy. The charges you're facing include deprivation of rights under color of law, evidence tampering, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations. Each count carries up to 10 years in federal prison. The interrogation continues for 4 hours. Sullivan's union attorney arrives with grim expressions and legal pads full of damage control strategies that become increasingly irrelevant as more evidence is presented. Meanwhile, news of Hayes' arrest and release spreads across social media like wildfire. Number sign planted evidence begins trending nationally. Civil rights organizations issue statements. Cable news networks dispatch crews to the courthouse and police headquarters. By afternoon, the story had reached national prominence. Hayes holds an impromptu press conference on the courthouse steps, flanked by his legal team and community leaders. Yesterday evening, I was arrested on fabricated charges by an officer who planted drugs in my vehicle. This isn't just about me. It's about a pattern of abuse that has destroyed countless lives in our community. Reporters shout questions about federal investigations, civil lawsuits, and political implications. Hayes maintains his composure, but his anger is visible beneath the professional demeanor. Officer Sullivan didn't know he was arresting the mayor. He thought he was arresting just another black man he could frame without consequences. That should terrify every citizen who believes in justice and constitutional rights. The fallout accelerates throughout the day. Sullivan is suspended without pay pending investigation. The FBI seizes his arrest files, evidence lockers, and body camera footage. Defense attorneys across the city begin filing motions to review their clients' cases involving Sullivan's testimony. By evening, the corruption investigation had expanded to include potential supervisory failures, evidence room security, and departmental training procedures. What began as one officer's racist assumption has become a federal case study in institutional failure. Sullivan returns home to find news vans lining his street and reporters shouting questions through his windows. His confident swagger has been replaced by the hunched posture of someone whose entire world has been destroyed in a single day. The officer who believed he controlled the streets has discovered that accountability, when it finally arrives, is swift and merciless. 6 months later, the federal courthouse buzzes with media attention as United States versus Derek Sullivan reaches its climax. The courtroom gallery overflows with reporters, community activists, and families of Sullivan's previous victims who have waited years for this moment. Sullivan sits at the defendant's table, his once confident demeanor replaced by the hollow stare of a man whose life has been systematically dismantled. The evidence against him is overwhelming. Security footage, body camera recordings, forensic analysis, and testimony from 43 victims whose cases have been reopened. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Elizabeth Carter asks. We have, Your Honor. The foreman, a retired teacher, stands with papers that will determine Sullivan's fate. On the count of conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of evidence tampering in the first degree, guilty. On the count of false imprisonment. The guilty verdicts continue for 12 separate counts. Each one represents not just Sullivan's crimes, but vindication for victims who were never believed, families torn apart by false arrests, and young men whose futures were destroyed by planted evidence. In the gallery, Marcus Williams, the young man who shared Hayes's holding cell that first night, wipes tears from his eyes. His own case was among the first to be dismissed when the investigation began, but the damage to his employment record and reputation took months to repair. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty as charged. Judge Carter sets sentencing for the following month, but the maximum penalties are already clear: 47 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Sullivan's pension has been revoked, his law enforcement certification permanently suspended, and civil judgments from victim lawsuits have bankrupted him completely. The institutional consequences extend far beyond one corrupt officer. Captain Rodriguez, who failed to investigate multiple complaints about Sullivan's behavior, accepted early retirement rather than face disciplinary hearings. 3 supervisors were demoted for inadequate oversight. The police union, which spent years protecting Sullivan despite obvious red flags, faces federal monitoring of its complaint procedures. But the most significant changes come from Hayes's reform agenda, which gained unstoppable momentum after his arrest, became national news. The city council, previously resistant to police accountability measures, unanimously approved comprehensive reforms within 90 days. Every officer now wears mandatory body cameras that cannot be manually disabled. All interrogations and arrests are recorded from multiple angles. An independent civilian oversight board reviews every use of force incident and misconduct complaint, with real authority to impose discipline. The evidence room has been completely restructured with biometric access controls and continuous surveillance. Chain of custody procedures now require multiple signatures and digital tracking for every piece of evidence. Random audits occur monthly, conducted by external forensic specialists. Most importantly, the department's culture has begun shifting. Officer Torres, Sullivan's former partner, now leads training sessions on constitutional policing and bias recognition. New recruits undergo extensive screening for racial bias and authoritarian tendencies. Community policing initiatives have replaced aggressive patrol tactics in the neighborhoods Sullivan once terrorized. The verdict today represents more than justice for individual victims, Hayes tells reporters outside the courthouse. It proves that no one, not police officers, not city officials, not anyone, is above the law. The civil lawsuits have resulted in $4.2 million in settlements paid to Sullivan's victims. More importantly, each settlement includes acknowledgement of wrongdoing and formal apologies from the city. The monetary compensation can't restore lost years or repair damaged lives, but it provides some measure of recognition for the suffering inflicted. Sullivan's sentencing hearing draws an even larger crowd than his trial. Victim after victim takes the stand to describe how his fabricated arrests destroyed their lives. Jobs lost, families broken, reputations ruined by criminal records based on planted evidence. Jerome Washington, a college student whose scholarship was revoked after one of Sullivan's arrests, speaks with quiet dignity. I lost my education, my future, my faith in justice. But seeing him held accountable today gives me hope that the system can change. Judge Carter delivers the sentence with measured gravity. Mr. Sullivan, your actions represent a fundamental betrayal of public trust. You systematically violated the constitutional rights of citizens you swore to protect. The court sentences you to 35 years in federal prison. Sullivan shows no emotion as he's led away in shackles. The man who once strutted through city streets with absolute authority now faces decades behind bars, his law enforcement career a case study in corruption and abuse of power. Outside the courthouse, Hayes reflects on the long journey from that humiliating night in handcuffs to comprehensive police reform. The changes haven't been perfect or complete, but they represent genuine progress toward accountability and justice. This case proves that truth eventually surfaces, no matter how deeply it's buried, he says. Our job now is to ensure these reforms become permanent, so no other families suffer what these victims endured. 2 years after that night in the Financial District parking lot, the transformation is visible everywhere you look. The police department that once protected officers like Sullivan now leads the nation in accountability measures. Use of force incidents have dropped by 67%. Civilian complaints have decreased by 43%, while complaint resolution rates have improved dramatically. Officer Maria Santos, one of the new generation of recruits hired under Hayes's reformed standards, patrols the same neighborhoods Sullivan once terrorized. Her approach couldn't be more different. Community engagement instead of aggressive enforcement, de-escalation instead of domination, service instead of control. We're not warriors occupying enemy territory, Santos explains to a group of new trainees. We're guardians protecting our neighbors. That mindset changes everything about how you interact with the community. The evidence room that once enabled Sullivan's crimes now serves as a model for departments nationwide. Every item is tracked digitally, accessed through biometric controls, and monitored by continuous surveillance. Random audits occur monthly, conducted by independent forensic specialists who report directly to the Civilian Oversight Board. Marcus Williams, the young man who shared Hayes's holding cell that first night, has become a community advocate working with the mayor's office on criminal justice reform. His wrongful arrest, once a source of shame and desperation, now fuels his passion for ensuring others don't experience similar injustice. People ask me if I'm bitter about what happened, Marcus says during a community forum. But anger without action is just poison. What happened to me, to the mayor, to all of Sullivan's victims? It exposed a system that needed changing. Now we're building something better. The federal monitoring of the police department is scheduled to end next year, with oversight transitioning to permanent civilian control. The reforms that began as emergency damage control have evolved into institutional culture change that will outlast any single administration. Hayes, now in his 3rd year as mayor, reflects on how a moment of humiliation became a catalyst for comprehensive reform. His approval ratings remain high, built on tangible improvements in police-community relations and transparent governance that wasn't possible before the crisis. Sometimes the worst experiences become opportunities for the greatest progress, he says during his weekly radio address. But change doesn't happen automatically. It requires constant vigilance, community engagement, and leaders willing to confront uncomfortable truths. The security footage from that September night has been viewed millions of times online, becoming a powerful tool for police training and civil rights education. What Sullivan intended as another routine abuse of power instead became irrefutable evidence of systemic failure and the urgent need for reform. Sullivan himself serves his sentence in federal prison, his law enforcement career a cautionary tale taught in police academies nationwide. His conviction helped trigger reforms in dozens of other departments facing similar patterns of misconduct and abuse. The story that began with racist assumptions and planted evidence has become proof that accountability, while sometimes delayed, can ultimately prevail. The reforms implemented in response to Hayes's arrest have prevented countless future injustices and restored community trust that seemed irreparably broken. But vigilance remains essential. Reform is not a destination, but an ongoing journey requiring constant commitment from citizens, leaders, and law enforcement officers who understand that true authority comes from serving others, not dominating them. What would you do if you witnessed injustice in your community? How can we ensure that accountability isn't just a one-time event, but a permanent change in how we approach justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about real people creating positive change in their communities.